On Wednesday, the 30th of April, 1980, just before 11:26 hours, armed terrorists seized the Iranian embassy at Prince's Gate, Kensington, opposite London's Hyde Park. They took 26 hostages, of whom 16 were members of the embassy staff. The remainder included Iranian, Pakistani and British nationals who were visiting the embassy, of which 2 were employees of the BBC, and Police Constable Trevor Locke, an officer of the Diplomatic Protection Group on duty at the embassy at the time of the attack. The embassy alarm system, connected with New Scotland Yard, operated at 11:26, and armed DPG officers were deployed to contain the area around the embassy. By 11:31, the embassy area was contained by 2 armed sergeants and 7 armed constables of the DPG, forming what was to become the inner cordon. Residents in nearby buildings were evacuated, and pedestrians moved away from the area, and an outer cordon formed. All movement in front of Prince's Gate was restricted unless out of sight of the embassy windows. A high brick wall dividing the service road of Prince's Gate from the main Kensington Road in front of the premises was put to good use, protecting the movement of officers across the front of the stronghold. The area at the rear of the premises, a communal garden for the houses in Prince's Gate, provided plenty of cover to maintain a watch on the rear windows and entrance. Nearby flats gave sniper cover and made excellent observation points. Forward control, known as Alpha Control, and base station, known as Zulu Control, were first set up in the Royal School of Needlework at number 25 Prince's Gate. Alpha Control regulated and controlled all police movements in and out of the area. Photographic branch set up a camera observation point to cover the front of the premises. Negotiations were opened almost immediately, the negotiator sometimes speaking to the hostages and terrorists through an interpreter. These early contacts were through the lower windows of the embassy. While the negotiations were taking place, C7 and other support services began the technical attack on the stronghold. Gaining intelligence by technical means was a high priority. Because of the need to isolate the terrorists, the telephone and radio aerials were cut. Eventually, a field telephone was negotiated into the embassy using somewhat primitive methods. This forced the terrorists to communicate only with the police. At 16:30, one of the hostages, the embassy's 3rd secretary, was released having shown signs of illness, assessed by police as stress symptoms. A doctor had been requested by the terrorists to attend the embassy, but this was denied by the police commander, a policy maintained throughout. However, careful pressure by the negotiators caused the terrorists to release the hostage. By the end of the first day, Operations Support Group and C7 had installed video surveillance cameras, enabling both forward and base stations to maintain a continuous watch on the premises. The second day saw a growth in the demonstration by supporters of the hostages that had commenced the previous afternoon. The chanting of the sympathizers provided a sound background against which negotiations continued and the police build-up carried on. Chris Kramer, one of the employees of the BBC, was released, suffering from acute stomach pains, and was taken to hospital. By now, the cordons were well established and preparations for a long wait well in hand. A box on a pole proved to be a simple yet effective method of passing objects into the embassy and, more importantly, of obtaining finger impressions of those inside the stronghold. Food was provided by catering branch for those in the embassy, which, when collected at the door, gave an opportunity to photograph one of the terrorists. Catering branch also set up feeding centres within the cordons to feed the increasing number of police officers and support staff. Alpha Control was moved into number 24 Prince's Gate, a move which brought Zulu, C-13 and other control units into the same building. And for the duration of the siege, the control of cordons and dispositions of all serials and movements was exercised from here. Representatives of all support units, including publicity, engineering and surveyors branch, were established in Alpha Control, enabling the Chief Superintendent to have all available information and means of communication close to hand. Negotiations sometimes had to be continued via the windows of the stronghold, observed by, among others, the C-7 control van. Commander C-13's anti-terrorist squad set up a control room on the first floor of number 24 and maintained connection with Zulu and Alpha controls, and in conjunction with the negotiators assisted in the continuous flow of intelligence. They were also responsible for the containers which were used to supply food to the embassy. This was necessary to prove continuity should forensic evidence become available by their use. The supporters of the hostages continued their peaceful demonstration. But when police started to restrict the area in which they were protesting, scuffles broke out, during which one police officer was injured. The demonstrators remained noisy but became non-violent, and on the advice of their government eventually dispersed, and calm descended on the area. The peace was only on the surface. Inside 24 Prince's Gate, the negotiators continued building the rapport upon which it was hoped could be built the negotiations that would ultimately lead to the terrorists' peaceful surrender.
I'll stay with you on the telephone. My colleague David, who came to talk to you last night, will be walking down and will be with you, I suppose, in about 1 minute's time. And he's got them on the end of a pole. Just stay with the telephone for a second or two. I'll call you back in a moment. I've just got to go give him a nod now to start walking. Okay. Right. Negotiator 2, you can start moving down now. Will the officer with the set with Negotiator 2 acknowledge, please? Negotiator 1, over. Salam. I'll stay on the telephone, if I may, just to see if there are any queries arise at the time. What? Just to see if any queries arise or if you have any problems.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
How's things? You okay?
Thank you very much.
Good. Salam is awaiting your arrival, and he expects you in about 50 seconds. Over.
Negotiators the control deal. Can you repeat that? There's bad signals of
Yes, I was telling you that negotiator 2 was now withdrawing back to us with his piece of wood, over.
Received, understood. Thank you, over.
Hello? Hello?
Hello. I want to thank you for the cigarette.
Salim?
The hostages too.
Salim, that's my pleasure. We sent 200 tipped and 200 plain. We didn't know what else to do. Was that all right?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Good night. Okay. Thank you very much, David.
Saturday dawned with the press of the world still watching, while inside the negotiations continued.
To allow hostages to come onto the pavement outside of the embassy.
I told you, we don't want the life protest. We don't want this word,
Right, well,
we want just turning around.
The still photographs were taken by the terrorists on a camera which was subsequently found among the debris in the embassy.
لطفاً شما هر پیامی دارید دیکته کنید بنده ترجمه کنم و ایشون بنویسن.
exactly what he wants.
Our message is that we wish to see Tony Clark.
Slow please.
دومی مسئله سفیران رو باید
ببخشید یه دفعه دیگه بگید.
این یکی بود. دومی مسئله سفیران. اینا سعی نکنن ما رو به بیراهه بکشونن.
Please, we would like to see Tony Crab, and could you please catch him now?
Is he prepared to release a hostage after he has seen Tony Crab?
آیا حاضر هستیم بعد از اینکه آقای تونی کراب دیدین یکی از گروگان‌ها را چیز آزاد کنیم؟
خیر. ولی اگه جسد بیجونش رو میخواید بعد از چند لحظه تعریف رو دیدید.
No, we're not prepared to free any of the hostages, but if you want to see a dead body of any of the hostages, you may see them in a few minutes.
Will you say to Sally that I did not report back that threat before because it will destroy our argument, and I wish to keep this threat at the moment between ourselves because it will not help me to argue his case.
میگن که این تهدیدی که قبلا هم یه دفعه گفتید اجازه بدید میگه من
نمیخوام بشنوم. این تهدید نیست.
I refuse to listen. بفرمایید.
این تهدید نیست. این خواسته ماست. کاری نکنید که گروگان‌ها رو بکشیم با اینکه ما دلمون نمیخواد اینو بهش بگیم.
یه دفعه دیگه بفرمایید.
بگید کاری نکنید گروگان‌ها رو بکشیم با اینکه دلمون نمیخواد.
Please don't do something which will cause us kill the hostages because we don't really wish to do so.
سفارت رو منسجم بکنیم با خودمون.
The commissioner, Sir David McNee, accompanied by the deputy commissioner, came to see for himself how things were going. Negotiations moved outside again, and a negotiator, accompanied by an interpreter, continued discussions through the windows of the embassy. There was an increase in aircraft noise as the result of a request from Zulu to lower the flight path from London Airport to raise the ambient noise levels. Sniper control and photographic branch in position in the adjacent block of flats had a good view of all of the windows and entrances at the rear of Prince's Gate. Police Constable Locke was used as an intermediary during the negotiations, appearing at the window several times. Monday, the 4th of May, and the build-up in tension was reflected by the activity in Zulu control, which maintained overall control of the operation, as well as links with outside agencies and the government. A local mullah was called in an unsuccessful attempt to ease the situation. Shots were heard inside the embassy and a body was put out of the building.
This is a counterproductive move.
The body, that of a hostage, was picked up by officers from C-13, covered by armed D-11 officers.
Now,
45 minutes to kill the other. It's up to you to decide. Hello?
yes, hello, Salim.
And if you want to do any stupid thing, all the hostages will be killed at once.
As a result of the sudden deterioration in the situation, Zulu had a last-minute briefing involving negotiators and the government liaison officers.
Any other police action? This is one of the options. Or they will remember that during previous chats, they said they wanted to speak to FDR, whichever is the
Iranian official.
The Iranian official in the room. We certainly let the argument on the last thing.
Squads from the SAS regiment had been on standby and were given their final briefing, using all the available information relating to the interior of the building. As a result of shots being heard and the production of a body indicating a worsening situation, the police commander assumed that the safety of the hostages was at considerable risk and therefore requested, through the commissioner, government authority to commit the SAS.
Let me discuss these things because it's important.
Armed police officers moved up to take up covering positions whilst the negotiators kept in contact with the terrorists.
Well, is there going to be, if we have one coach, is that going to be enough? Because Mr. Trevor will only be able to drive one coach, won't he?
Yeah, it's one enough. About 25 seats.
About
29 seats, sorry.
About 29 seats.
Yeah.
Now, whereabouts shall we put that coach first? Shall we put it?
Opposite of the door.
Well, opposite of the door is a very vague phrase. If you're looking out of the window...
After we check it,
Yes.
then you will put it beside the door.
Well, let's talk about that then.
Okay.
Opposite the front door, you're looking straight out over the park.
And after we check it, you will...
Yes, can you listen to me and we'll just talk about the first movement of the coach up to the front door. Now, if you look out of the window directly ahead of you, there is the park. Now, to the right, there is just the end of the wall, and that is where those gas men were working on the generators and were working on that gas leak.
Okay, I'll phone you after 3 minutes.
No, let's talk about this.
Yeah,
Salim.
they're asking me. Just a few minutes, I'll go. I'll come again.
Hello, Salim. Salim.
We are listening to some suspicious movement.
There is no suspicious movement,
There's
Salim.
suspicion. Okay.
Salim.
Just a minute, I'll come back again. I'm going to check.
Salim, there is no suspicious movement, Stim. Salim. Salim, there is no suspicious movement.
After a short period, the hostages were evacuated from the embassy into a reception area at the rear of the premises, where they were secured until checked by the police reception team.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that today we can be a little more relaxed than we've been in the last 6 days.
Tuesday, the 5th of May, at a press conference at New Scotland Yard, Deputy Assistant Commissioners Dello and Nevens, with Commander Duffy, faced the world's press to answer questions and put the Metropolitan Police view of the incident.
I wonder if you can tell us chronologically what happened without being asking sensitive questions or a question which is adjudicative. For instance, can you tell us exactly how it started yesterday?
We tried to continue with the strategy that I'd employed throughout the 6 days. That was one of negotiation, and of course negotiation is largely a matter of trying to get something out of somebody else for giving something. We were realizing that we were coming towards the end of what could be offered reasonably, knowing the government attitude towards terrorism, and there was a clear indication that we were going to have very difficult negotiations, and that proved to be so yesterday morning. The negotiators worked extremely hard to keep a dialogue going. All the time a dialogue was going, we felt that hostages were not being shot. We tried to impress on the terrorists exactly what would happen in this country as opposed to other parts of the world, possibly, that if they didn't harm anybody, they would come out unharmed themselves. But what didn't make very much impression, and gradually as the day wore on, it became apparent that things were becoming a little unstable and fractious inside the Iranian embassy, and it became apparent after a time that it was unlikely that we were going to get very far with the normal sort of negotiations that we'd had in the past. It was about this time that the threats became apparent of shooting hostages. As you know, eventually shots were heard. It's not the first shots were heard possibly around about midday. I can't recall offhand, but we weren't sure that they were in fact anything to do with shooting of a hostage. Again, it is difficult, of course, to judge whether in fact that's a bluff or not. It's quite a decision to make at that stage. We had to look at a lot of evidence. As the day wore on, we began to believe that the chances of it being a bluff were lesser rather than greater, and as you know, shots were heard again later on. A body eventually was put out, or something was put out. I had to investigate that and ensure that it was a body. As soon as we were into that business, knowing that somebody had been killed, then the whole matter changed, and we had to think in terms of finishing the siege in a different fashion. When we knew that there was a very good chance of a second hostage, it was my opinion that we could not tolerate a third, or indeed risk the threat that was then being made of a succession of hostages being shot. It was at this stage that I advised the Commissioner that the matter should be resolved by military assault. And this was passed on to government, and the Home Secretary, as you well know, gave his authority for that, and we finished the siege in the manner that you saw last evening. I have no regrets about the operation at all. As far as I'm concerned, it was totally successful, and that the timing was as accurate as I could make it on the evidence that I had to hand.